Hello, I'm Chip Pickering. I want to welcome Commissioner Brendan Carr to the INCOMPAS 2021 Policy Summit. He joined us last year, and we welcome him back this year. He's just been a tremendous leader at the FCC on clearing away the obstacles and the roadblocks and the barriers for our member companies who are deploying, whether it's fiber, 5G, small cell, fiber, the next generation network, saving just billions of dollars and streamlining and speeding and shot clocks and reasonableness of fees. And so we want to thank the commissioner for his work on that. He's been a leader in telehealth and telemedicine at the FCC. I forgot to say that he was nominated and confirmed by the Senate both 2017, 2019, a graduate of Georgetown, then Catholic University, magna cum laude, editor of the law review there. So just a great background. He practiced at one of the best telecom technology firms in DC at Wiley Rein. And so just a wealth of experience, both as a staffer at the FCC, as a commissioner in private practice. And so we're thankful to have him here with us today. I was just interviewing Congressman Bob Laude. He said great things about you, how you climb poles to all heights without fear. And so thank you for joining us again, and we'll kind of get right into it. Great. Yesterday, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the 1996 Telecom Act. And this week, we're building off the foundation of that act and looking to the future. Tell us your priorities, your vision, your thoughts on the 96 Act, what we've learned from it, and where we can improve or build upon it going forward.
Well, first, thank you so much to Chip and to INCOMPAS for the chance to join you all again. I always really enjoyed the discussion. I've had a chance to spend time with some of the member companies out in the field, including Unity. I got to spend time literally, although in my case, briefly in the trenches with them as they were rebuilding some networks in the Gulf Coast area after one of our hurricanes came roaring through there. So always glad to spend time with the crews and learn about how we can be helpful at the FCC. So yeah, big anniversary or birthday this week. Telecom Act turns 25. I was thinking about myself, as I do most of the time, and how 25 years ago I was a junior in high school, and I tried to find a picture of myself to see who aged better, myself or the Telecom Act. And I think with all the criticism the Telecom Act gets, it would definitely win in that comparison. Back then I actually had hair. The hair I had wasn't white like this thing that I've got now around my face. But in all seriousness, the way that I think about the Telecom Act of 96 is, in one way it was a big hit, in another way it was a big miss. And I think the big hit that is really hard to discount is the promotion of competition, in new entrant within various telecom sectors, whether it was, local into long distance, whether it was entry into video market. I mean, again, a lot of people don't realize this, but we had it, whether the state level or the federal level, literal barriers to entry that created and allowed monopolies to exist. And those barriers were torn down to new entrants. So I think that was a good success. I think the big miss is sort of related to that. And this is not a criticism on anybody that worked on the 96 Act. It was a product of the time. But I think it was really impossible to see back then how the sort of stovepipe approach that we took is now sort of a limiting factor when it comes to competition across sectors. So I think the big hit was promoting competition within sectors. I think the big miss was convergence and how we've now got entities that are in different stovepipes competing with each other with just drastically different regulatory regimes. Similar to that, I would say on the media ownership front, again, you've got the failure to sort of see, rightly so, the competition that traditional broadcasters and others are facing. So whether it's convergence between fixed and mobile, or convergence where there's more competition to media ownership, I think that's the big miss. And therefore, going forward, I think we need to move forward with regulations that are going to be neutral as to technologies, neutral as to sectors, and move to a place where competitors are competing in a much more level playing field, rather than the roots of where they started dictating so much of the regulations that apply to them.
Well, that is, as we look to the future, and there's a new administration, new Congress, the transition to a new chair, the acting chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel. As you look to that transition, and as we talk about learning from the 25th anniversary of the Telecom Act, and we truly are in an age of convergence, where a 5G network is really going to be on the foundation of fiber and fixed and wireless, small cell as well. Going back to your good work on streamlining and speeding the deployment of both small cell and fiber networks. But you have been working on the emergency broadband benefit, on telehealth, telemedicine. Where do you see working together with the new chairwoman of the interim chairwoman of the FCC, and where do you see your priorities going forward?
I think we have a lot of really good opportunities to work together and make bipartisan progress. I put it in a couple buckets. I'd say I'd start obviously with 5G. If you look back to where we were in 2016, there was a lot of people that were sort of writing an early obituary for the U.S. When it comes to our leadership in 5G. They looked to China and other countries and just said, there's no way that the U.S. can compete in 5G with a regime like China. And we stepped in and obviously didn't mimic their approach. We went with a U.S. approach, which was getting more spectrum out there, which was updating and modernizing our infrastructure rules. And really, infrastructure builds at the time have largely flatlined. In 2016, we had roughly 700 new cell sites get built in this country. It was just not going to work in terms of securing U.S. leadership. So as you noted, I helped out the FCC with some reforms there. We went from 700 cell sites in 2016 to 2019 when we had over 46,000 cell sites get built. So just a massive increase in infrastructure builds. And lo and behold, we are now investing more per capita, building more per capita when it comes to 5G than China and really almost any other country out there. So really proud of the progress we've made. Of course, the key now is how do we build on that? How do we extend that leadership? And the good news is we have ways to do it. On the spectrum front, we have a lot of spectrum now in the pipeline that we need to move to auction on. I think first and foremost is going to be 3.45. I think we can move forward with an FCC order very quickly. I think we need to focus on power levels that are going to enable 5G builds, particularly when you look at the high clearing costs that are been proposed by NTIA. I think a sort of a 5G auction rather than a CBRS style auction is going to be key to generating the revenues necessary to clear that spectrum, have a successful auction. So 3.45 on the spectrum front is going to be very important. And then again, sort of building on a lot of our infrastructure stuff. Apart from sort of that 5G agenda, I think you noted telehealth. This is going to be a very big priority, and thankfully it's a bipartisan priority in this country. It was actually in your home state, Mississippi, just over 2 years ago. I was on a trip in the Mississippi Delta and first learned about this new trend in telehealth. So the FCC for years has supported connectivity to brick and mortar hospitals, and that's great. We're going to keep doing that. But in the Delta is where I learned about that new trend towards making sure that patients have connections to their healthcare provider when they're on in their own home. So anywhere you have a smartphone or tablet now, you can get healthcare. So we started the process then of supporting that trend in telehealth. Good news is when COVID hit, Congress provided funding in the CARES Act, and we used that procedural vehicle, that connected care proceeding, to stand up a emergency COVID-19 program. We now have additional funding for round 2 that I'm excited about. So look forward to working with my FCC colleagues on that. In workforce, I think we've got a lot of bipartisan opportunities here to make sure we have the tower climbers, the telecom techs that are necessary to build out this country's 5G workforce. So there's a lot of common ground. I think there's a lot of bipartisan opportunity to pursue a 5G agenda, work on telehealth, promote our country's workforce. And finally, I'll mention national security. This is one where, again, we've had a lot of bipartisan consensus. We have a number of open proceedings right now looking at entities that are operating in the U.S. with ties to the communist regime in China. We've teed those up for action. I think we need to move quickly in closing out those proceedings and coming to a decision, and one that's going to promote our national security. So I think that's another area where I hope to make a lot of progress, and I think we will do so in a bipartisan manner.
You know, as you're talking on a bipartisan manner, and you mentioned workforce training, we were able to work across industry divisions, incumbent to competitor, and all platforms. And we just sent a letter to the administration and to the congressional leaders, really promoting workforce training for the fiber industry, the tower, the wireless industry, the cloud technicians that we need. What people don't realize is that as we're racing to deploy the networks of the future and to speed connectivity to every American, rural and urban, and the rivalry with China, it still takes people that are trained to do the job of deploying those networks. And you've been you had the foresight to take this issue up really when nobody else did. And so we want to thank you for your leadership on workforce training. Anything you'd like to add to that, either from the congressional perspective of what we can do as we work with a new Congress and promoting those types of programs that would enhance or support what you've already started at the FCC?
Yeah, well, thanks so much. As you note, I think the three key inputs here are spectrum, infrastructure, and workforce. There's a really good bill that was introduced a week or two ago on the Senate side, Senator Wicker, Senator Thune, that would be a 5G workforce bill that would make a lot of progress on adding the workforce we need. If you look just at tower climbers alone, we have probably 27,000 tower techs in this country, and we need to add about 20,000 more. If you were to spread that out to other parts of infrastructure builds, I've seen numbers as high as 100,000 more workers. And these are really good paying jobs. You can start with just a few weeks of training, and you can be making $60,000 off the bat. These are small businesses, so people move through the ranks very quickly. A lot of the tower crews I've met, the owners of these companies started as just line tower workers themselves and can start their own business. So a lot of a growth opportunity there. So I think the legislation that was introduced in the Senate is a good start. I know last Congress in the House, Congressman Wahlberg introduced legislation that would sort of be a companion to that. I think that'd be a good effort. And I've been working just directly with community colleges. We've had success. There's been one in Aiken, South Carolina, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Oklahoma recently stood one up, Raleigh, North Carolina, and I plan to be in Mississippi next month, meeting with a community college there that's showing a lot of interest in standing one up. So I think continue to engage at the community college level is part of it. I think these legislative bills are going to be good boosts, and then looking at the Department of Labor to see where they can continue to support apprenticeships and other initiatives in this area.
We're appreciative of your leadership on this, and as you tour through my home state of Mississippi, anything we can do with our member companies, home headquartered Mississippi companies, C Spire, Unity, Windstream, all are active in Mississippi, and we want to do everything we can to support the workforce training. They're all active in telemedicine and leaders and innovators in telemedicine and telehealth. So whatever story we can tell that helps you do your work, and then as we advocate for those things. As you talk about spectrum and the critical input that it is, talk to us a little bit about the NPRM on 12 gigahertz, 500 megahertz, what its status is, and kind of the process going forward so that both sides hopefully can find a win-win of how do you have multiple use within that band of spectrum.
It's a great question. When Chairman Pai circulated the 12 gigahertz NPRM, I believe it was December-ish timeframe, my team and I worked hard to make some edits to that document to make sure that we are proceeding in a balanced way. The ideal outcome, I think, is a win-win where we can continue to see all the public interest benefits that come from supporting this new generation of low Earth orbit satellites. I mean, we are, very focused, obviously, on closing the digital divide, and I'm optimistic that these new generation of low Earth orbit satellites can play a significant public interest role, particularly in the most costly to serve parts of the country. And I think we saw that with the outcome of the RDOF auction. At the same time, if we can get more terrestrial spectrum out there without undermining that, important public interest on the other side, then I think that's great. And I think this proceeding, moving forward in a balanced way, will allow a greater level of engagement on the technical issues that I don't think, happened outside of an NPRM. And so I'm hopeful that we'll see more, record evidence, more engagement even outside the FCC's record to work through some of these technical issues and see if there isn't a win-win path forward.
Well, we want to work with you to find the win-win and to give the technical and the engineering, the substance. The FCC has a great engineering staff and it's proven itself out time and time again. So we'll work closely with you and your staff, our member companies like Dish and Dell Technologies and RSA, and many others that are looking at how do you combine fiber and fixed, and is this spectrum, can we have a dual use of terrestrial, land, wireless, and satellite in a way that all sides can operate and be successful. So we look forward to working with you on that very important proceeding. One other issue that kind of comes around on it seems like a perennial basis, or from commission to commission.
I think I know where this is going.
Okay. Kevin Martin to Janikowski to Wheeler to Pye. Is there a way that we could find a permanent solution? Is it time in this Congress for the legislative body to see if they can surround the principles that I think have great bipartisan support, but find it a new title or a new way that could codify a permanent, predictable, certain solution on this issue?
Well, if I was a skeptic about, heading back into this Title II debate, Chip, I would say that it is all over except the yelling and the fundraising. But I'm not a skeptic. I'm very hopeful here. I think that there should be a path forward. Again, if you separate out the question of authority from rules of the road, which I think is the right approach, I think you identify so much common ground. And I think last Congress, Senator Wicker, Senator Sinema made a lot of progress working in a bipartisan way to codify some basic rules of the road. There is so much common ground around no blocking, no throttling, a lot of other rules that you could put in that bucket. And I would support that. To me, I think the third rail here is Title II. And if you look back, people disagree with me, I get it, that's fine. But in my view, if you look back at the 2-year experiment with Title II, I think it proves that it was a monumental mistake. A lot of people focus on Comcast and AT&T and the messaging, but if you look at all of the small providers across this country, really mom and pop entities that are trying to build out internet infrastructure, the onslaught of Title II regulation resulted in them, and they submitted filings to this effect under penalty of perjury, pulling back on investment, pulling back on builds. And at a point in time in this country where connectivity is more important than ever before, it would be a mistake to go back to that. I also think if you look at, COVID-19 and you look at the performance of internet networks around the world, I think that was the ultimate stress test for a country's approach to internet regulation. And if you look at countries that much more heavily regulated internet providers, their networks performed far worse than they did in the US based on our approach. And the reason for that is our light touch approach, really over 20 years, is what has stimulated just massive investment in our networks. I mean, we get per capita investment essentially double what you see in Europe and other parts of the world. So I think the current approach that we've taken is a smashing success. We've got lots of investment. We've got new infrastructure builds going out. We got more miles of fiber being deployed than ever before. Competition is increasing, prices are coming down, and we've got a regime in place where we're partnered with the Federal Trade Commission, to police any violations of the commitments that ISPs have made. So I think the status quo is working very well. If people do want to revisit this, which they do, I would say then let's revisit it across the board. If the concern is about a free and open internet, then I think it's time that we look holistically at all of the actors in the internet ecosystem. I think, again, this goes back to the point that I made about the 1996 Act. I think the failing of the 1996 Act was a stovepipe approach to, then the telecom space. And I think ISP specific in sort of singling them out for unique regulation when they're competing in a much broader internet ecosystem today doubles down on this sort of stovepipe approach to the 96 Act. If you look at entities that right now are engaged in actions that are blocking access to content, it's not your mom and pop ISP, it's Google, it's Apple, it's Amazon Web Services. So I think the status quo is working, and we should not go back to the failed approach of Title II. But if we're going to go back, then let's do it through a broader lens that looks at all actors in this space, all potential choke points when it comes to free speech on the internet. But I also think there's some hurdles to going back down this approach at the FCC, which is why I'd encourage a permanent solution in Congress that avoids Title II. For one, in 2017, Congress passed the Privacy CRA, which prohibits the FCC from putting back in place privacy rules. So if we were to reclassify internet providers under Title II, that strips the FTC of its jurisdiction. So all privacy rules are gone as to ISPs. And now we have this unfillable donut hole where we couldn't put privacy rules in place that apply to ISPs. I think that's, pretty squarely an APA arbitrary and capricious action that would be reviewed pretty closely on appeal. I also think the First Amendment is an issue that really didn't come to the fore the last time we did Title II, but if you look at some of the DC Circuit opinions, including then Judge Kavanaugh, he raised a lot of concerns about the First Amendment when it comes to some of the obligations. And I'll note, obviously, the Supreme Court is different now than it was in 2014, 2015. So running a play back at the FCC is one that I think is fraught with hurdles and difficulties that simply didn't exist when the FCC did this in 2014, 2015.
You have reminded
not that I feel strongly about this, Chip.
Well, you've reminded me why this is so difficult to reach a consensus, and why it has gone back and forth. From INCOMPAS's perspective, we hope that we can find a permanent bipartisan solution and work with the commission on the protections that we think really are critical for our members and for the economy. We have been very engaged, as you know, on this issue. We haven't always agreed, but I think that we can find a good faith way to uphold what I think the country desires on the fundamental principles of net neutrality.
Yeah, I think exactly right. And I think, we do have a lot of, really important work ahead of us. And we touched briefly earlier on the emergency broadband benefit program that's coming up at the FCC. That's something that, we have a statutory deadline to act on this month. And I'm really looking forward to moving forward on that. I think, for me on that particular one, there's, two top priorities. Number one is we need to make sure we have really robust participation in this program. So we need to start the program at a point in time that sort of a variety of providers and a variety of technologies will be able to compete for Americans' broadband dollars, at least the subsidized broadband dollars in this case. Second, we talked a lot in the public notice leading up to this about how do we use this program, the appropriated funds here, to support remote learning for kids. I think that is something that we should look very hard at. How do we prioritize school kids when it comes to the emergency broadband benefit program. Those are sort of two of the thoughts that I have, and I really think that this is going to be an example. I hope, where all of us at the FCC come together and really step up when it comes to this important initiative that Congress has tasked us with getting done this month. It's a quick turn, not an easy task for the acting chair to step into, but the whole FCC team, I'm sure, is working hard on this, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, the emergency broadband benefit, Lifeline, E-rate. I've been telling our member companies, I really believe that this year is going to be one of those transformational years for the broadband industry, much like 25 years ago was when we introduced competition in the marketplace by the 96 Act across all platforms. But this is going to be the seminal moment where our country has a consensus and a commitment to connect every American. And how do we best do that? And the removal of barriers and the streamlining, the mapping, the programs, the traditional programs that need to be more flexible and more targeted to how do we get students connected at home as well as at school, healthcare in the home as well as in the hospital, work and commerce. This is, I think, a very exciting time to be at the commission for our member companies and the work that we do on behalf of them, advocating for them. This is one of those year to 2 year periods where I think we're going to look back and say that this was the foundation for the next 25 years. And so I look forward to working with you on getting the policies right, getting the funding to the right place, and having the applications that ride on top of the broadband networks really benefit the American people in every place, in every part of the country. So we thank you for your work and your leadership, and we look forward to coming to see you soon in the new office at the FCC.
Yeah, I'm in the building.
Or to continue to work virtually whenever necessary. But Commissioner Brendan, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chip. Really appreciate it.